My cousin moved into my grandma's house and wants me to quit college to watch her kids for free, but who will take care of her when the family gets mad? My name is Maya. I'm 22 years old, and I've come to the mighty Reddit to tell my story. 3 weeks ago, my cousin, Jessica, who's 28, showed up at the family house with her 3 kids, 5-year-old twins and a 7-year-old boy. Their dad isn't alive. She said she needed a temporary place to stay because her landlord had kicked her out for not paying the rent. My grandma Ruth, who is 74 and owns the house, immediately said yes. I live with my grandma because I'm finishing my degree at a nearby community college. I also work part-time as a teller at a local bank to pay for school and help with the household bills. My grandma gets Social Security, but it's not a lot, so I pitch in about $400 a month for food and utilities. We had a good routine going. She'd watch her soap operas in the afternoon while I studied, and I handled most of the cooking and cleaning because her arthritis makes it really hard for her to get around. The first week after she moved in was just chaos. The kids trashed the living room every single day. They drew on the walls with crayons. The 7-year-old broke my grandma's favorite lamp running around the house. Jessica would just shrug and say, "Kids will be kids." She spent most of her time on the couch looking at her phone while the kids were yelling and fighting with each other. I tried to be understanding. I bought food for 6 instead of 2, which took up almost my entire paycheck. I cleaned up every night after getting home from work and classes. Last Monday, I was eating breakfast before my 8 a.m. accounting class when Jessica sat down next to me. She told me she'd been thinking about our situation and had a solution. She wanted me to quit my job and watch her kids full-time so she could finally, and that's saying a lot, get her life together and find a good job. I stared at her, still kind of half asleep, because I'd gotten up early to get some reading done, not to listen to her nonsense. She told me she was serious and that it made perfect sense. She explained that childcare in our area is really expensive, and if I did it, it wouldn't cost us anything. She said I could always go back to school later when her kids were in school full-time. I told her no right away. It wasn't faster because I was trying to process both what I was reading and what she was saying. I still don't know which was harder to understand, because what Jessica was saying was just completely ridiculous. I told her I only had 1 semester left until I graduated, and I wasn't going to sacrifice all that for kids who weren't even mine. I also told her that my job pays well, and I need that money for school and to help out Grandma. She said I was just like the rest of the relatives, only thinking about myself, so we can be pretty sure this wasn't the first time she'd heard no. Jessica started crying and said she had nowhere else to go. She claimed I was the only one who could help her, and if I really loved her and her kids, I would make this sacrifice. I got up from the table and went to class without saying another word. I felt like I'd already said plenty. When I got back that night, my grandma was waiting for me in the kitchen. She told me Jessica had been crying all day, and maybe I should reconsider helping her. I explained to my grandma that I couldn't quit my job or drop out of college when I was only 1 semester away. Plus, without my job, there wouldn't be much money coming into the house. I mean, Jessica isn't working, and what my grandma gets isn't enough. Over the next few days, Jessica kept bringing up the babysitting thing. She'd comment about how exhausted she was and how hard it was to take care of 3 kids all by herself. She started leaving the kids with my grandma while she went out for hours at a time. My grandma, who can barely keep up with 1 active child because of her age and health, was worn out. Thursday. I got home from work and found my grandma asleep on the couch while the twins were jumping on the furniture, and the 7-year-old was in the kitchen trying to make himself a sandwich with a sharp knife. I stepped in right away and calmed the kids down with some snacks and cartoons. When Jessica came back 2 hours later with Target shopping bags, I asked her where she'd been. She said she needed some me time and had gone shopping because her clothes didn't fit anymore. Friday morning, Jessica cornered me again. This time, she had a written schedule. She wanted me to watch the kids from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., Monday through Friday. She said that would give her time to look for a job and maybe take some online classes to improve her skills. When I asked her about my classes and my job, she suggested I find online classes and some kind of remote job at night, basically telling me to just make it work. I told her to make her brain work. Jessica started yelling at me, saying I was being rude, insulting her, and that I was selfish. She said if our grandma taught us to help each other, I should listen to her and stop being a rebel without a cause. The shouting woke up my grandma, who shuffled out of her room asking what all the racket was about. Jessica immediately burst into tears and told my grandma I was treating her badly. My grandma looked at me with disappointment and asked if we couldn't just come to some kind of agreement. That weekend was even worse. She told the kids that Aunt Maya didn't want to spend time with them, which made me feel awful because I do care about those kids. Maybe not enough to watch them all the time, but I truly think they're completely innocent in all of this. The blame for their behavior and situation falls on one person, and that's my cousin. They started avoiding me and acting cold whenever I tried to talk to them. Sunday night, Jessica sat me down for yet another talk. She told me she'd been thinking about it all weekend and was willing to pay me to watch the kids. She offered me $200 a week, which is less than half of what I make at the bank. When I pointed this out, she said I should factor in that I wouldn't have to spend money on gas or work clothes. She also mentioned that spending time with kids would compensate me in other ways. The money wasn't the main issue. I'm so close to finishing my degree and starting my professional life. I already had potential job interviews lined up with local firms for after graduation. Yesterday, Jessica announced she'd found a potential job at a retail store, but she couldn't take it without reliable childcare. She said the position paid $2 an hour and had good potential for growth. She looked right at me and said this was my chance to really help the family. I actually laughed in front of her because that job pays less than mine, and she wanted me to quit my job to watch her kids so she could go work somewhere that pays worse. Jessica's intelligence was clearly not present during this conversation. I let her know that my answer was still no. She added that if I wasn't willing to help, maybe she'd have to move in with her ex-boyfriend's mother in another state, and then our grandma wouldn't get to see the kids anymore. I told her I thought that sounded like a good idea, and she should do what was best for her and the kids. My grandma heard that conversation and then pulled me aside. She told me she really didn't want Jessica and the kids to leave, especially since they're her only great-grandchildren. She asked if there was any way I could help, even if it was just for a few months until Jessica could get on her feet. I could see how much this meant to my grandma, but I also knew that if I gave in now, there would always be another excuse for Jessica needing just a few more months of help. If I agreed, I'd end up taking care of those kids until I was 35. 35 years of watching them, not being 35 years old myself. I'm supposed to graduate in December. I've worked so hard to get to this point, taking classes while working and helping take care of my grandma. I've already been accepted into the state university program for my bachelor's degree and have a partial scholarship. If I quit now or put it off, I could lose that opportunity. The only person I really feel bad for in all of this, besides the kids who have an entitled alien for a mother, is my grandma. She's just an older person who likes having people in the house. Before this, she was living alone. She's the only reason I haven't just opened the spaceship hatch and let the alien fly away. Maybe, hopefully, a UFO will just abduct her and solve a lot of the problems. Maybe the kids could be taken care of by their other grandma or whoever. So that's my situation right now. Update 1. This is to fill you in on what's been happening since my original post. First, I want to talk about the advice I got. Lots of people suggested I stick to my boundaries and not give up my education, which is exactly what I'm trying to do. Others said I should try to find a compromise that would work for everyone, but I honestly don't see what that could be. I already have a nearly full-time job, plus a pretty heavy course load. It's a final push until things get better, both stress-wise and money-wise. The week after my original post, Jessica kept pressuring me every single day about the childcare situation. She even started getting the kids involved in her campaign. She'd tell them loudly, when I was right there in the room, that she couldn't take them to the park or buy them treats because she didn't have a job and Aunt Maya wasn't helping her get one. The kids started asking me why I wouldn't help their mom. I'd respond, sometimes moms are such bad moms that instead of trying hard, they just prefer to find someone to blame. My grandma was getting more exhausted by the day. The kids were waking her up really early every morning, and Jessica was just leaving them with her for hours while she went out. Whenever I asked Jessica where she was going during these long stretches away, she'd always give vague answers about job interviews or errands. That Tuesday, I decided to try a different approach. I sat down with Jessica and offered her a compromise. I told her I could watch the kids for a few hours on weekends and maybe one night a week so she could go to interviews or handle important things. I explained that this was the most I could do without affecting my job and my studies. Jessica immediately shot down my offer. She said that having me watch the kids on weekends wouldn't help her get a full-time job, and that my offer showed I still didn't understand her situation. She accused me of just making token gestures so I wouldn't look bad. I don't know where I put that flamethrower I suddenly needed so badly. That weekend, I noticed Jessica was spending a lot of time on her phone, often going outside to take calls. When I asked her who she was talking to, she said it was prospective employers and housing assistance programs. It sounded like good news, but something felt off. Everything with Jessica just feels off. Monday, I had a late class and didn't get home until after 9 p.m. When I walked in, I found my grandma sitting in the kitchen with a worried look on her face. The kids were already asleep, and Jessica was nowhere to be found. I asked my grandma what was wrong. She told me Jessica had left that morning saying she had a job interview and would be back by lunchtime. She never came back, and my grandma had been watching the kids all day by herself. It was the third time that week Jessica had disappeared for the entire day, leaving my grandma alone with 3 little kids. I was furious. My grandma is 74 and suffers from arthritis. Taking care of 3 kids for 12 hours is not something she should be doing. When Jessica finally got back around 11 p.m., I confronted her about ditching her responsibilities. Jessica claimed she'd been at a second interview that ran long, followed by mandatory paperwork for the job. When I asked for details about the job, her story started changing. First, she said it was at a restaurant, then she said it was at a store. Then she mentioned something about customer service. I started to suspect she was lying about the job interviews. The next day, I did something I probably shouldn't have. While Jessica was out on another supposed interview and my grandma was napping, I looked through some papers Jessica had left on the kitchen counter. I found several unpaid bills, including a credit card with over $3,000 in debt and no payments for the last 4 months. There were also late notices from a storage unit and payday loan documents, but the most shocking thing was a bank statement that showed regular deposits of $800 every 2 weeks for the past 2 months. According to the dates on the statement, she'd been getting these payments since before she moved in with us. I realized then that Jessica wasn't actually looking for a job at all. She was collecting unemployment while living rent-free in our house and trying to get me to provide free childcare so she could keep avoiding any real responsibility. All those long absences weren't interviews. She was probably meeting up with friends or just enjoying free time away from her kids. That night, I decided to confront her with what I'd found. I waited until the kids were asleep and my grandma was too. I asked her directly if she was receiving unemployment benefits. She went completely pale and immediately got defensive. She admitted that she was, but said it wasn't enough to live on. She claimed what I saw was before taxes, and that most of it went towards things for the kids and other expenses. When I pointed out that she wasn't paying any rent or contributing towards food while living with us, she said she needed the money for clothes and gas to look for work. I asked her about all these supposed interviews. Jessica burst into tears and admitted that she had only actually gone to 2 real interviews in the past month. She said that looking for a job was harder than I understood, and that she needed time to mentally prepare for each interview. She claimed that leaving the kids with our grandma gave her the space she needed to focus. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I told her our grandma wasn't a free babysitter and that she was taking advantage of an elderly woman's kindness. Jessica started crying again and said since I wasn't a single mother, I didn't understand the pressure. I told her that wasn't the point. Jessica then accused me of being jealous because she has kids, and I don't. She said I was using my education as an excuse to avoid my family responsibilities and that I thought I was better than her just because I was still in college. Things got really ugly when Jessica said our grandma had confided in her that she was disappointed by how selfish I'd become. She claimed my grandma had told her she hadn't raised me to put personal ambition before family loyalty. This hit me hard because my relationship with my grandma means everything to me. I went to her room and woke her up to ask her if she had really said those things. My grandma looked confused and upset. She told me she had never called me selfish and was proud of how hard I was working on my studies. She admitted she was tired from watching the kids so much, but she didn't want to complain because she knew Jessica was going through a rough time. When I told my grandma about Jessica's unemployment benefits, she was shocked. She had actually been giving Jessica money for gas and other things because Jessica had been telling her she didn't have a cent since she wasn't working. My grandma realized she had been manipulated. The next morning, my grandma asked Jessica to sit down so they could have a talk. She told her she now knew about the unemployment benefits and was disappointed by her dishonesty. She explained that she was too old to be the main caregiver for 3 young kids and that Jessica needed to find another solution for childcare during the day. Jessica's response was to pack her stuff and announce she was leaving. She said she couldn't stay somewhere she wasn't valued or trusted. She claimed she had other relatives who would be happy to help her, unlike us. She spent the day making calls and arranging her move. I thought the drama would end there, but I was wrong. That night, Jessica's mom, my Aunt Veronica, called my grandma yelling that we had kicked Jessica and the kids out onto the street. Apparently none of those relatives were actually willing to take her in, but she did have a mother who was willing to blame us. My grandma explained the whole situation, including the lies about the job interviews and the unemployment benefits. There was a long silence on the other end, and then my Aunt Veronica said she needed to call Jessica and hear her side. Less than an hour later, my aunt called back. She had discovered that Jessica had been telling different versions of the story to various family members, trying to get money and sympathy from everyone. She was furious. Jessica ended up moving in temporarily with a friend, but not before sending me several nasty messages, blaming me for ruining her life and her kids' future. She told me I would regret being so selfish someday when I understood that family is more important than professional success. The house has been peaceful for the last week. My grandma and I have gotten back into our normal routine, and she seems much more relaxed. I've gotten back to focusing on my final semester of school. In the end, the solution was to call the alien queen. Update 2. Recent events have been so strange, I just have to share what's been going on. After talking to some other relatives, there are a few things I need to tell you, things that are pretty worrying. After Jessica left our house, things were quiet for about 3 weeks. I had almost forgotten about the drama when my Aunt Veronica called my grandma with some news. Jessica had been staying with her friend, but that living situation fell apart after just 2 weeks. I wasn't surprised at all. According to my aunt, Jessica expected the friend to watch her kids while she went out, just like she'd done with my grandma. When the friend refused and asked her to contribute to the household expenses, Jessica accused her of being a bad friend and left. After leaving the friend's place, Jessica moved in with our cousin Michael and his wife. That lasted for exactly 4 days. Michael called my Aunt Veronica to complain that Jessica was leaving the kids with his wife all day while she disappeared for hours. When they confronted her, Jessica told him not to be such an idiot to a single mother. Michael told her she needed to find somewhere else to stay. My Aunt Veronica was really starting to lose patience with Jessica's behavior. She decided to do some digging on her own and started calling other family members to see if anyone else had dealt with similar situations. Our cousin Rachel told her that Jessica had stayed with her family for 3 months about 2 years ago. She said Jessica had tried to convince her teenage daughter to skip school and watch the kids while she went out. When our cousin's daughter refused, Jessica left in the middle of the night, taking some of our cousin's jewelry. Rachel reported the theft, but besides getting the jewelry back, the judge basically let it go because Jessica was a single mother. Our uncle shared a similar story. At his house, she stayed for 6 months, with the excuse that she was saving up for her own place. But in reality, she was spending her unemployment benefits on clothes and entertainment while expecting my uncle's wife to watch her kids for free. The most disturbing story came from our great-aunt Marie, who was 82 years old. Jessica had stayed with her for 2 months last year, supposedly while waiting for an apartment. Marie, who lives alone and has mobility problems, ended up becoming a full-time babysitter while Jessica was out partying. When Marie fell and broke her hip trying to chase after one of the kids, Jessica didn't even come back to take her to the hospital. A neighbor had to call an ambulance. Veronica decided it was time for a family intervention. She organized a meeting with several relatives who had been affected by Jessica's behavior. They decided it was time to stop enabling her and agreed that no one would take her in anymore. They were going to be a united front and stop enabling her. When they presented this united front to Jessica, her reaction was explosive. She accused the entire family of hating her kids. She said we were all heartless people who didn't understand what it was like to struggle. She claimed the conditions were unfair and discriminatory. Jessica's response to the family meeting was to disappear completely. She stopped answering calls from relatives and deleted her social media accounts. For 2 weeks, nobody knew where she or the kids were. My Aunt Veronica was desperate, really worried about where her grandchildren were. Then, last Monday, I got a call at work from my grandma. She was crying and could barely talk. When I finally understood what she was telling me, I ran out of work and went home right away. Jessica had shown up at our house that morning while I was at work, and my grandma was home alone. She brought her 3 kids and several suitcases, claiming she'd been evicted from where she was living and had nowhere to go. She told my grandma that I had agreed she could come back temporarily until she figured out her next steps. My grandma, who was too trusting and was caught completely off guard, let them in. By the time I got home, Jessica had already made herself comfortable in the guest room again. The kids were running all over the house, and my grandma looked exhausted and overwhelmed. When I confronted Jessica about lying to my grandma, she flat out denied it. She claimed she never said I agreed, only that she hoped I would be more understanding this time. She said she was desperate and out of options, and surely I wouldn't kick 3 innocent kids out onto the street. I told Jessica she had to leave right away or I would call social services. I explained that nothing had changed since she was here last time, and I was still not willing to watch her kids for free. Jessica started crying and begging, saying she just needed a few days to make other arrangements. She promised she wouldn't ask me for help with the kids and that she would handle all her responsibilities. My grandma, who felt bad for the kids, begged me to let them stay just one night while Jessica looked for somewhere to go. Against my better judgment, I agreed, just for one night. That was 5 days ago. Jessica is still here, and she's already repeating the same patterns as before. Yesterday, I got home from classes and found my grandma watching the 3 kids all by herself, while Jessica was nowhere to be found. When she came back late that night, she said she'd been at the library applying for jobs online. I checked the browser history on my grandma's computer, which Jessica had been using for the past few days. Instead of job applications, I found evidence that she had spent hours on dating sites and social media. She wasn't looking for a job. She was looking for her next victim to move in with. This morning, Jessica cornered me in the kitchen and started in again with her usual speech, saying she needed help with childcare so she could work. When I reminded her that she had promised not to ask me for that, She said circumstances had changed and that I was being inflexible in a family emergency. That's when I understood something clearly. Jessica is never going to change as long as family members keep letting her get away with it. She sees our kindness as weakness and our boundaries as suggestions, not hard rules. Every time someone gives her another chance, she takes it as a green light to go right back to her manipulative tactics. I've decided enough is enough. I called Aunt Veronica and told her about Jessica's latest lie. Veronica was furious to hear that Jessica had tricked our grandma again and was already breaking her promises. We agreed it was time to set some real boundaries. Tomorrow, Veronica is coming over to have a final talk with Jessica. We're going to give her two options. Either she leaves voluntarily and starts taking responsibility for her life, or we'll have to take more serious steps to protect my grandma from any more manipulation. The saddest thing about all this is that the ones who pay the price for Jessica's bad choices and manipulative behavior are her kids. They deserve stability and a mom who puts their needs above her own comfort. But Jessica seems incapable of being that kind of responsible mother. Veronica also knows about my leaning towards calling social services. It's something we'll be discussing. Update 3. The past month has been intense, but I think we've finally reached a resolution that protects my grandma and gives me peace of mind about my own future. Veronica came to our house on a Saturday morning at a time when Jessica couldn't exactly pretend she was out job searching. Veronica brought her husband, Uncle Rick, for support, and they both sat Jessica down for a serious talk. Veronica and Uncle Rick gave her an ultimatum. The kids would be leaving with them right then and there, and she would go wherever she needed to go to find a job. Jessica agreed to the terms, but then tried to negotiate. She said that now that the kids wouldn't be in the house, she could stay there and use Grandma's house as a base of operations to get her life together. She called it Operation Rebirth, and said she would use our help to transform into the person everyone expected her to be. Our Grandma's response was simple: get off my property. Now, without the kids there, Grandma honestly couldn't care less about Jessica. So, that was that. Jessica left, and the kids went with their grandparents. I graduated 3 weeks ago and got my degree. My grandma was so proud, she cried during the ceremony. I've already been accepted to transfer to the state university to continue my bachelor's degree and start classes next month. I've also started a new job that's related to my studies and pays better. I'm still staying with Grandma and helping out with the household finances. We haven't had any direct contact with Jessica since she left, but Aunt Veronica has gotten updates through the family. Apparently, Jessica lasted about 3 weeks with her high school friend before that living situation fell apart too, which is kind of funny because she thought the problem was the kids. But even without them, she's just as much to handle as 3 kids put together. Jessica is living with someone else now, but I don't know who. Update 4. My cousin is finished, legally speaking. For about 2 months before the events I'm about to tell you about, we didn't have any contact with her, and my aunt only got sporadic updates. Things like she was looking for a job or had something lined up, but never anything concrete that would justify my aunt giving the kids back. During this time, even the kids found some stability. Since summer break was over, the oldest went back to school, and the younger ones started their first year. They were doing well, they had a routine. Honestly, there was no one better to take care of them than Veronica and my uncle. But Jessica found out that there's a state where, besides giving unemployment benefits, they also pay extra for each child. That's not how it works here. Here you get unemployment benefits based on your work history, but they don't pay extra per child like she heard happens in this other state. So she showed up at my aunt's house to try to get them back and collect what she felt she justly deserved. When Veronica and my uncle refused to hand the kids over because Jessica hadn't improved her situation at all, and she actually confessed her plan to them, they told her no. But she came back with the police, accusing them of kidnapping her children. What followed was a police investigation involving Child Protective Services, where the whole family literally gave statements, and everyone spoke very poorly of Jessica. The court granted full custody to the grandparents and also took away Jessica's social security check. A fair deal, if you ask me. Frankly, I don't think she ever deserved it anyway. It's been almost 3.5 months now without hearing anything from her, but at least now she can't keep hurting her kids. Now we can really say, in space, no one can hear you scream.